Hey everybody, welcome back to another MSP Live Chat brought to you by Ninja RMM. I am Director of Content Community here at Ninja. My name is Jonathan Crow. As always, I've got with me our Channel Chief Advisor, former MSP owner, Tom Watson. How you doing, Tom?
Hi, everyone.
And we have Dom Scafidi. He is a relatively new face. He was around for our last live chat. He is a new content manager at Ninja. Dom, you're rocking a nice t-shirt.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. It's an Adapt IT t-shirt. I think it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, Adapt IT. Yeah, for those who don't know, that was the virtual summit we put on back on May 19th. It feels like 6 months ago at this point, but it wasn't that long ago. I think I see some people in the chat who are attendees. So thanks, guys, for checking it out. Good to see familiar faces as always. Dan the man, thank you for joining. Alex Farley from Lifecycle, Brian from Gozinta, thank you guys so much for showing up. And let's give a little spotlight here to our special guest. This is Eric Tilds, and Eric is a attorney who specializes in IT technology law. He was the chief. Let's see if I get this right, Eric. He was the chief general counsel for Logicalis, which is a huge global MSP. And now you're off on your own. You're doing your own thing and helping out MSPs with their MSAs and helping them stay out of trouble. What else would you like to say there?
That's a great intro. Thank you, Jonathan. I've spent 22 years of my 23-year legal career working in-house for IT services companies. Whether they are VARs or systems integrators or MSPs or SaaS companies. It's what I do. It's what I know. And not just Logicalis, not just, huge global multi-billion dollar players. But I started with my own company. I was a partner in a very small systems integrator that we grew from the three of us up to about 250 people over the course of a dozen years. We happened to exit to Logicalis, and that's how I ended up there. But right now I have my own firm. And I exclusively provide legal services to IT services providers. Again, whether it's MSPs, SaaS companies, VARs, you name it.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. I mean, we really appreciate you taking the time. Everybody, this is a billable hour here, right? No, this is
a bunch of bills.
This is such a good opportunity for everyone here on the call to ask questions, right? And so let's get right to that. For those of you who this is your first live chat, this is all about having you guys have a chance to connect with each other. So use the chat, do that. We want to hear from you guys too, what you're dealing with. Maybe you've got some answers on things that you've worked through with your MSA. Definitely share with the rest of the group. That's going to be helpful. A nice way to pay it forward. Also, if you have questions for Eric, which I hope you do, and I'm sure you do, feel free to use the chat. But also, if you have a burning question, you really want us to pay attention, there's an ask a question function down there at the bottom of the screen. Use that. We'll be able to check on that and tee up Eric. So definitely want to answer everyone's questions. And with that, I think the other thing I want to bring up is, first of all, this session is being recorded. Everyone will receive a link to the recording after the fact. Also, if you just refresh this window a couple minutes after it's done, if you still have this link, you'll be able to watch the recording. So if you have to run away, or if you've got colleagues that can't make this live, you can certainly watch the recording. I'm going to bring up right here our agenda doc. And this has links to some resources too. I'm going to drop this in the chat. And this is something you guys obviously can keep, take with you, revisit. It gives... Here's a good one right here, right off the bat. This is links to tell you how to contact Eric. So Eric, I know, is already just super generous with this time here. He's offered to answer questions. You should definitely reach out to him. You can connect with him on LinkedIn or shoot him an email right there. We've also got a Slack group where there's a link you can join that as well to keep this conversation going. It's a place where before and after live chats, we're kind of regrouping, doing some pregame, postgame stuff, and including links to additional resources there. And then we'll get to some other things, including upcoming events at the end of the live chat. But let's kick things right off the bat and maybe establish a baseline here. So we launched a poll, and for everybody who hasn't seen it yet, it's down at the bottom too, near the ask a question. and we're asking on a scale of 1 to 5, how well do you know what's in your MSA? How well do you understand it? And I see some people are voting right now. And Eric, I'm not sure if you're able to see these results.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so are these surprising to you? Is this pretty common from what you're seeing?
It's pretty common. I was part of another call not too long ago, and I think that about 70% of the respondents were a 3 or below in terms of what they understood or how much they understood about their MSA, both what it says and how it works and how it plays with your customers and your vendors, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, how about yourself? I mean, you're a former owner, and now, of course, through Ninja and through yourself, you talk with MSPs every single day. MSAs are constantly things that come up with you. Does this line up with your experience as well?
This does. This is where the money is. And I guess my approach was a little different. I was raised by 2 attorneys. And so as soon as I started my MSP, they were all over me about doing contracts and doing it the right way. So I had a real focus on it. And I'll tell you what, it will benefit you down the road. It will enable you to sell your business someday. And I do some consulting work. And that's actually how I met Eric. And Eric, so I know his work in person, what he does, and it's excellent. He can put together the best MSAs I've ever seen, and it is of utmost importance. And we're going to dig into some of the really important things you need to make sure your MSA does for your business and your clients.
Yeah, well, let's shift over to you, Eric, then. And like our agenda says, let's establish a baseline first, because I know folks on the call are coming from different backgrounds, different stages of where they're at. Alex jokes, where's the entry for the poll? We started with a handshake and never updated our agreement. People are coming from different places, right? And so let's start off with some general high-level stuff. In your MSA, what are the big things that it should be covering? What's some of the core pillars there?
Yeah, so look, Alex is not alone, right? Most of my clients start out that way. The other thing I hear a lot is, my brother-in-law, he's a divorce attorney and he wrote my MSA for me. So if you haven't looked at your MSA, if you haven't had someone who really plays in the space a lot update it, please do it quickly. But let's start talking about the framework, right? What is the MSA and what does it do? From my perspective, it kind of falls in the middle of the commercial contracting relationship. And what I mean by that is that most MSPs have relationships with their vendors, with their suppliers, and they have contracts with them. And those vendors and their suppliers supply services to their customers. And the MSA sits between the two, right? So you have a contract with your vendor, that's fine. And then your contract with your customer for the legal terms and conditions is your MSA. This is something that Tom and I violently agree on, is that your MSA and your statement of work, which is sort of the third tier, should be very separate, right? Your MSA is your legal terms and conditions. Your statement of work are your business terms and conditions. My goal with any MSA is to look at it, negotiate it, get it signed, put it in a drawer and forget about it. Because if you ever need to pull your MSA out of the drawer and see what it says, it means something bad has happened, and you just don't want to be there. So what's in an MSA? Again, it's the legal terms. It's things like warranties, things like indemnification. One of the most important things that we're going to talk a lot about later is limitation of liability, and how do you limit your liability? But it's also things like, how do you get paid? How do you bill your customers? How often do you bill your customers? How should your customers pay you? And then one of the big things that I see missing from a lot of my clients' MSAs when I first start working with them is that, most MSPs grew out of resellers. So what are the terms that govern your reseller relationship? When you resell hardware, software, things like that, the terms are what they should be, very, very different than the terms under which you sell professional services and managed services. There's different limitations of liability. There are different warranties. Almost every part of that relationship is different. And how do you incorporate everything all together such that you can be sure that Your statements of work reference your MSA. Your quotes that you're selling hardware under reference your MSA. And how do you make sure that all of your obligations from your vendors flow all the way through contractually down to your customers?
That's a great point. And Eric, when is a good point to obviously when you're entering into a new agreement with a client, now's the time to go over your MSA. I just wonder if you have any advice there in terms of should you be going over these things line by line with folks, or how does this play into the whole sales process, I guess?
So MSAs and lawyers, for that matter, are generally not good icebreakers for the sales relationship, but it should come pretty shortly thereafter, right? When you have an opportunity that's more than 60 or 70% through the funnel, I think is a good time to put the MSA in front of your customer. My recommendation is to not talk to your customer about it. Just give it to them. You don't want to be in the business of giving your customer advice on what the MSA says. Definitely have solid conversations with your customers about the statements of work, because that's the business side. That's what you're going to be doing for them. That's what's going to make your customer either happy or not happy with your services. The MSA is a necessary function to do business, and leave it to the lawyers as best you can.
Okay, interesting. And just to back up a little bit, again, going to that kind of establishing a baseline here. So we got a good question from James. He's saying, I see a lot of other MSPs using terms and conditions instead of labeling it an MSA. He's wondering, is it basically the same thing as long as all the documents represents the terms and conditions?
Yeah, the title really doesn't matter. I would say about 2/3 of my clients use the term MSA. But to some people, MSA means different things. Is it a master services agreement, a master solutions agreement? It really doesn't matter whether it's that or whether it's terms and conditions, as long as it's very clear what the MSA or the T's and C's cover. And that's one of the important aspects of putting language in there to make sure that it does cover absolutely everything that you're doing with that customer. And because it's separate from your statements of work, it's also important to the term and termination line up. You don't want the MSA to maybe expire before a SOW expires, and now you're doing work without terms and conditions. That would not be good.
Right. Tom, do you want to jump in here for a second and going back to your own experience with your own agreements, and I'm sure they evolved over time. But can you give some specific instances of how in depth you got? I mean, I know you have some opinions on this and how detailed you should get in terms of what you're providing and what tools you're using, that sort of thing. Because there's some cases where you want to be absolutely clear, but you also don't want to lock yourself into certain things.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like to do. And as you know, we have our own MSA up. I want to point out, you should probably call Eric or someone like him to review something like that if you're using it. But I like to keep it really kind of vague in terms of exactly what tools. So I want to say that we're going to provide adequate antivirus for your network. We're going to provide adequate backup. But I want to leave myself the ability to swap those tools in and out and choose what's best under the situation. Okay.
And actually, so this brings up another thing with Ross asking, any advice about going back to certain clients? Eric, let's call back on you for this one. So obviously you were mentioning, okay, maybe this isn't during the sales process, not the best icebreaker is to plop the MSA in front of someone. But what about the clients that, you need to go back to, and maybe this is during renewal and that's cut and dry and simple. Or we were talking about this in our pre-chat conversation. The world's changing, right? It's getting riskier. There's all sorts of circumstances that make being an MSP today different than it was 5 years ago, right? Right. There's also just the fact that your business is constantly changing. What you're offering is changing. The types of clients you're working with is changing. So, any other advice or recommendations you have about when a good time it is to go back to clients and say, hey, we need to change some things in our agreement. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and that's Ross. That's a great question. And I hate to give a lawyer-like answer, but it depends, right? If you're making a wholesale change of your governing terms and conditions for your business, then I wouldn't wait until there's a renewal or a significant change in service. I'd go back to them now, and it's a tough conversation to have. Don't get me wrong. But if there's a critical change you're making, for example, if you give me your MSA and I tell you that your limitation of liability is just bad and it exposes you to undue risk, that's the kind of thing that you're going to want to go back to your customers for immediately. And like I said, it's a tough conversation because the customer was going to say, why? What's in it for me? And maybe you can offer your customer something for it. And that something can be absolutely anything. But if it is instead just an iteration of your terms and conditions, then it's usually no problem to wait until renewal time or again some significant change in service. But no, they're really tough conversations to have with your customers. It's something anecdotally I went through in my days at Logicalis. We had a huge corporate policy change that changed a significant part of our MSA. And we had to go back to every one of our 1,100 customers and say, hey, Mr. Customer, if you wouldn't mind signing this addendum to change your MSA. And it's tough. You get some unhappy customers.
Yeah, I've had, when I've done that in the past and I felt like I needed to put a new contract in front of someone because what I found my early agreements was I didn't allocate for growth of companies that well. Yeah. And I didn't have clauses in there that made it as they added, because I had some companies that all of a sudden scaled up quickly and they felt like everything was covered. And I had to go back to them and say, no, everything's not covered. We did this contract for X amount. Now it's changed. And now as you're adding 5 employees per month, we need to change the language in that contract. And then what happens is it brings up this whole discussion where a lot of them want to revisit everything in the contract. And that's not really the conversation you want to have.
Yeah, it's tough. And one other thing to note, and this is sort of a way that I like to structure MSAs, is the MSAs that I generally draft don't have to be signed. A lot of my clients simply post the MSA online on their website. And instead of having your customers sign an MSA, you simply reference a hyperlink in your statement of work with all your business terms in it, and say that this statement of work is governed by the MSA that's posted at www.whatever, and it's online. And that makes it really easy to update your MSA and not have to go through the process of having it signed all over again. And what you end up with is a long list of dated MSAs on your website that says, if your SOW was between this date and this date, here are the governing terms. It also gives you the option or the possibility of keeping MSAs out of your customer's lawyer's hands. Because if it's not in front of them, if it doesn't require an ink signature, it might not need legal review.
So Eric, I like that. It's kind of what you see a lot of programs and apps out there where they reference, hey, the term, here's up here the terms and conditions, and or maybe even you add a component on there if you want to make sure they have read it, where they have to go and click a box or two and accept, and then you have a record that they did indeed view it. I think it's a fantastic solution to this.
So this is kind of a sort of related question, a little bit on a tangent, but we have a question here. Are online terms and services holding up at all, or should we stick with hard copy signed original MSA agreements?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I can't give the audience legal advice, but in my experience, if drafted properly, online MSAs are okay. Okay,
great, thank you for that one. And then we have another question about security that we'll circle back to, but maybe just humor me for a second. So. We're talking about having your MSA be something that potentially you don't even need to sign. You can just have to refer to it. And now we're putting the document that you're actually signing your statement of work. For anyone else in the audience, maybe I'm just the only one, but can you give a breakdown of some examples? Okay, what are the different types of things we're talking about here that for your MSA versus your statement of work?
Sure. So your MSA is going to have your warranty in it. You know, what is your warranty? It's what are the circumstances under which you're going to perform, and if it fails, re-perform that work. That's really important, right? Because I'm sure we've seen a lot of customers say, well, I want you to warrant your work for a year. And I'm talking more about project-based things than I am necessarily MSP activity. But making sure that your customers understand that you do have a limited warranty, you do have a limited time frame, that there's a sole and exclusive remedy for your services not working, and that remedy is you will re-perform those services. So that's an example of warranty. And then there's a disclaimer of warranty. There's a whole bunch of legally implied warranties that come into play unless they are specifically disclaimed. And they can't just be disclaimed, they have to be disclaimed in a certain way, so as to be conspicuous in an agreement. So you can't really hide it in the fine print. So warranties is a big issue. Limitation of liability is probably the biggest issue in an MSA. And there are two different ways that MSPs limit their liability. One is by limiting the types of damages that are recoverable. Another one is by limiting the amount of damages recoverable. By types of damages, I mean, you want to only be liable to your customer for direct damages. Meaning if your customer is down as a result of something that you did, you don't want to be on the hook for the profits that they would have generated during the time period that they were down. That's an indirect damage. And then the amount of damages, right? You don't want to bet your company on any given client on any given day. And if you don't have a carefully crafted limitation of liability in terms of the amount of liability that you're subject to, then you are doing just that. You're betting your business every time you walk out the door. So that's a big one. Having non-solicitation clauses, you don't want your customers hiring your people. Those are MSA type activities. And SOWs are the business terms. What exactly are you doing for your customer to keep them safe, to back them up, to provide a wireless solution to them? It's all of the business terms. And the important thing there is it's not just what you're doing for the customer, it's what your expectations of the customer are, right? A SOW is not just one-sided. It's not just what ABC MSP company is going to do for you, but there could be a laundry list of things that you expect from your customer. Your customer has to provide a safe workspace. They have to provide utilities. That there can be 50 different requirements for your customer. And then it's going to contain price and terms and things like that, things that can change on a regular basis, which is, again, why you want to separate it. Such that you sign the MSA once, or you reference the MSA once, and then every time the business needs between you and your customer change, then it's just a new SOW.
Thank you for that.
To confirm, on the SOW, you're often going to have, you're going to list your products and services. It's one of the main things that you cover. And you're going to make it in there so that you have the ability, so that now that's separated out, it gives you a much easier ability to change that and to inform them of changes to what they're getting from a products and services perspective without changing that terms and conditions over here that's under the MSA.
Correct. Even though your terms and conditions in your MSA should be reviewed on a regular basis, it's not going to change as often as your SOWs with your customers will change.
Got it. So let's talk about go back to security, because it's such a big. It's what everyone's talking about for good reason. We see the headlines all the time. It's just a riskier world we live in, right? When it comes to security, what are some of the changes that you've seen, Eric? What are some of the questions that you're getting? Have you seen the landscape kind of force some changes with MSAs or the advice that you're giving in the last year or so?
I frankly see the advice that I'm giving change more with the SOWs than I do the MSA, right? When I draft an MSA, I'm going to assume that my client is going to be providing some kind of security type services to the customer, and it could be across a broad spectrum of things. But what changes is the MSA, because incident response is something that we really weren't talking about 5 years ago. At least most of us weren't talking about it 5 years ago. But if you read most MSPs, MSAs, you could infer that incident response is included in whatever your customer is paying you on a monthly basis. And that is not a situation that you want to be in. You do not want to be providing incident response unless that's your business is providing incident response. So, we hear a lot about right of boom and everything that happens then. It's something that we really have to pay attention to in statements of work. It doesn't mean you can't help your client in the event that they have a security incident, but it means that you have to do it carefully. You have to contract for it. And it's tough because you want to help your client. Your customer's calling you in the middle of the night and they're saying, oh my God, I've been subject to a ransomware attack, or oh my God, there's been a data breach. What do I do? And your first response is you want to help them. But sometimes by helping them and going outside of your SOWs with them can do a lot more harm than good.
Can you go back to that? Oh, go ahead, Tom.
What I'm hearing here is now that we have this cybersecurity issues and ransomware, you want to make sure the client doesn't look at your response times and feel that is incident response. You want to separate that out such that if there is a true incident ransomware, you've defined how you're going to proceed if something happens with that, and that is different, and that's clear to the client.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm wondering if you can go back to use a phrase there that maybe not everyone's familiar with. And that's what was it, to the right of the boom?
Right of boom. Yeah.
What's the right of boom?
The boom is a security incident, right? Right of boom on the timeline is everything that happens after the security incident, whatever that security incident may be. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen MSPs go in and restore from backup and do all the stuff that they think they're doing to help the clients. But in actuality, maybe it's a criminal matter. Maybe you need to do a better job of preserving data, preserving the forensic nature of what you're doing. And unless, again, that's your business, I prefer to leave that to incident response companies and law firms who have large incident response teams. Otherwise, number one, you're never gonna get paid for the work because there's gonna be an insurance company involved. And if you're not on the panel, you're not getting paid. And number two, it's outside the scope of the services that you're offering to your customer.
So it sounds like, obviously security just adds such a specific lens to everything. But really, if you zoom out, it's really defining exactly who's responsible for what exactly you're providing. Because to your earlier point, with security, with anything really, a lot of times your clients just assume you do everything, right? What are they paying you for?
Exactly. And that's why the statement of work is so important. It's not just what you're doing for the customer and what the customer's responsibilities are, but it's also what you're not doing for the customer. And not just on the security side. Talk about, desktop support. There are things that you're doing for your customers to support their desktops and their laptops. But you got to draw the line somewhere, right? If they're, changing someone's laptop every other day to a new laptop, it's probably not something that you want included in your services. So there's inclusions and exclusions for everything that you're doing, along with everything you expect your customer to be doing.
And let's bring up one question that Alex got, sticking with security for a second. So a big mentality that's been catching on and getting more and more acceptance as we see more and more headlines of breaches is the assume breach mentality. Basically, you have to operate on the premise that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You got to be prepared. Are you seeing MSPs coming to you, asking for advice, looking to address that in a certain way, to be able to talk with their clients about it, to have this reflected somehow in their contracts? Yeah,
not necessarily in their contracts, but maybe in their practices, right? So again, another thing we didn't talk about 5 years ago were tabletop exercises, right? Going through an incident, a pretend incident, exercising your incident response plan to make sure it works. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but one of the first 3 things that should be in every incident response plan is call your lawyer. Right? Because you don't know what is necessarily going on. And your lawyer, someone who's trained in this, someone who's been through this a bunch of times before, can help navigate the way. I'm not seeing a lot of changes, a lot of wholesale changes to MSAs because of it. I am seeing changes in statements of work. And I'm also seeing an increase in the number of MSPs that are offering those tabletop exercises as part of their maybe annual service that they'll do it once a year with their customer.
Eric, I see a very appropriate question right now that says, any common and standard MSA for reference?
So it's a great question, and something, Tom, that you and I have talked about a bunch. If you're going to hire a consultant, they can give you a sample MSA. If you're going to hire a lawyer, they cannot give you a sample MSA. It's essentially malpractice, right? Because as a lawyer, I don't know what you're going to do with that MSA. I don't know if you're going to start using that MSA. And if you do use a model MSA that might not be tied to your business and to your risk profile and to what it is that you do for your customers, and you start using it, and I gave it to you, then I get in trouble. So it doesn't mean that every MSA is written from scratch. That would be crazy, and I'd be able to deal with about 3 clients a year if that were the case. Instead, there's a bunch of model clauses that can go in it, but a lot of it comes out of an iterative process that I go through with my clients to learn about their business, learn about their risk profile, learn about how they do business, how they collect money from their customers. All of that stuff goes into an MSA. And so because of that, at least lawyers don't really have model MSAs that they can share.
On top of that, Eric, I'd just like to point out that my MSP and how I do business is going to be particulars to verticals I work with, to how I work with my clients, to my response times, my staff, and things like that. I'm going to want, this is an area where you don't want to cut back. You want to spend the money to do it right. This is something you can use over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. And probably almost more so for SOWs than for MSAs, right? SOWs are going to be 50% similar from MSP to MSP. MSAs are going to be 50% similar from MSP to MSP. SOWs are probably going to be 20% similar from MSP to MSP, because what you're doing for your customers is very different than what the guy next door is doing.
And Eric, just a question here that was asked earlier from Ross is around the topic of security, and I'm generally curious on this one as well. How does a MSSP MSA differ from just an MSP MSA? What are maybe some of those additional security type clauses that might need to be added?
So frankly, there's not a lot, at least in MSAs that I write, there's not a lot of difference. I assume that there are going to be security services in some way, shape, or form that you're going to be performing for your customer. But where you do see differences is if your customers are going to be having access to your systems, right? Then you're talking about adding acceptable use policies. You don't want your customers to use your systems for any illicit means. And usually when that happens, it's a bad actor inside the customer. You talk a little bit more about encryption. And you talk a little bit more about, what you expect from your customer to do from a security standpoint. And that specifically is anything that they're not contracting.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say anything that you're not contracting with your customer to do from a security standpoint, they are responsible. And that's got to be very clear in your MSA.
Gotcha.
Now, Eric, one of the things I think might be in there is that a lot of MSPs that are doing security might have, when it comes down to incident response, it's hard to have an expertise in that. You might contract that a little differently and define that differently than an MSSP would, where you're offlaying that who's going to do the IR to someone else and defining that.
Correct. And that's I see that more in a SOW than an MSA, right? So if there is an incident, particularly a security incident, then yes, it's going to lay out in the SOW what you're responsible for, what you're not responsible for, and if there is a contract with a remediation firm.
And actually, okay, so to this point, Lance brings up a question. Man, there's so much confusion around what happens when a breach goes on, and now with insurance providers just being such a big element of it. So he's asking, doesn't cyber insurance policy, do they have any input on your attorney? And what I responded with was, I know that that's true for IR firms, like you pointed out. You know, they've got their list of firms that they approve of that they're going to make sure that you work with. But attorneys, I mean, is that something they have input on as well?
Most policies, yes. Unless you have a choice, it's called a choice of counsel clause in your insurance policy, then it is your insurer who will choose your lawyer in the event that there is an insured claim. So yeah, they're absolutely right. And look, we're seeing a lot of really crazy stuff happen, particularly in the cyber insurance arena. We're seeing a lot of premiums going through the roof. We're seeing a lot of non-renewals. We're seeing just a deeper microscope into your business and into your contracts for them to even write you a policy these days. Cyber insurance companies are scared, rightfully so, of huge claims.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually, I'll find this article to drop in the chat. I saw just recently a report going around showing basically losses and premiums being jacked up. But yeah, I mean, it's insurance companies seeing cyber insurance is a big profit center for them, and now they're getting hurt by them, and unfortunately, that's hurting insurance customers now too. It looks like.
Yeah, definitely, and frankly, that brings up a good point. In an MSA, there's generally an insurance section of an MSA that tells your customer what kind of insurance you're obligated to provide, and it tells your customer what insurance you expect them to have. And it does go both ways here, right? Because we do like to craft MSAs that are fair and balanced. Granted, they might be a little bit slanted toward the MSP, but for the most part, they're going to be fair and balanced. And in insurance clauses, I'm seeing more and more MSPs require their customers to carry cyber liability insurance in addition to your general liability, workers' comp, auto, property, and all the rest. And we're starting to see a little bit of pushback from the customers on that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it brings up questions, right? I mean, I would assume a big response to that kind of assertion is going to be, well, what is it? Who should I go to? What do I do about this? I mean, they're going to ask the MSP, and then is the MSP not wanting to? I've seen in discussions, some people advise, okay, you don't really want to get involved in that too much. You want to keep that on the client. But again, your reaction, or as you pointed out, often a reaction is to be able to help. So any advice around that, about handling that conversation?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't advise, providing the name of an insurance company or even a broker. I would advise the customer to go to their insurance broker, whomever it is, and talk to them about it. You don't want to be in the business of recommending in the event that there is an incident and for whatever reason it's not covered by their cyber liability policy.
All right, let's. I want to give a quick time check. We got 20 minutes left. I want to make sure that everybody who is on the call and has questions, now's the time to fire away. But we do have a couple more topic areas that I want to make sure we get to. The first thing, though, is there's another question regarding. I had to think about this for a second, and I was kind of embarrassed that I did. But CYA. So, like, obviously, you want to cover your bases there. When you're an MSP and you're making security recommendations, this is a topic that comes up all the time in live chats in various ways. I guess when you're trying to handle risk, when are you covered? We've had people talk about, okay, do you send people basically a disclosure they have to sign by refusing whatever it is they're trying
a recommendation, right?
Yes, a recommendation. Thank you. That they're kind of absolving you of risk. I'm sure this has come up a lot with MSPs and conversations you're having.
Yeah, I talk to my clients all the time about that very topic. And is it something I recommend? Yes. Is it enforceable? Maybe. It really depends. I'm not aware of any higher court test on something like that. The question is, what do you do in the event you make a recommendation, your customer says no, and they won't sign a waiver or a release or an indemnification agreement, right? What do you do? Are you prepared to walk away from that customer or not?
Eric, I have a real view on this. I'm not making cybersecurity recommendations to clients. I'm making cybersecurity demands and requirements.
Yeah.
And because you're just, if you're putting something out there and you're expecting them to make a decision, first of all, they are not the experts when it comes to this. You should be. And ultimately, it's your responsibility. If there's a cyber incident and you're managing their network, you're going to be on the hook in some way. So to me, it's going to the client saying, here's what we need to do security-wise. And if they say no, I'm handing them something that says we're canceling my agreement with you. I'm just not going to even entertain that with the client.
Yeah, or you're not going to enter into an agreement with them in the first place, right? Because that's where it usually comes up. But yeah, and that's the right thing to do. But I'm sure we've all started somewhere, right? And sometimes you might want to take that risk, and if you do, then fine. As long as you know the consequence of doing it. It's not something that I'd recommend. But that's the conversation I have with my clients about waivers is it really necessary? Or are you going to walk away from a customer if they don't sign the waiver?
Eric, do you think, and this is Alex, thanks for asking this again. We're going to go back to the assume breach mentality and maybe just the broader shift of, I guess, security maturity, right? I mean, of things getting more defined, of incidents being so common now that there's kind of playbooks on how to do things. Do you think risk has gone up that way, or is it being reduced in any of these ways of at least we're starting to map things out and define things better?
I think it's going up. I really do. There's everyone, whenever there's an incident, you're always looking to point a finger. And it's really, really easy to point the finger at the MSP, even if it's not the MSP's fault. So simply because of that, I think that it's definitely riskier for MSPs to do business today than it was 10 years ago.
So what are the levers that we can pull? And I know we've already kind of covered them here with the points that you're making, but maybe like high level, I'm going to toss a couple out there, but please take over for me. That, being extremely clear about what you're doing and what you're not, the services you're providing, and the things you're not responsible for. Working on your liabilities clause. I mean, what else are we talking about in terms of levers for reducing risk? Yeah,
look, it's every part of that 3-tiered contracting process, starting with your SOW between you and your customer, making sure that's absolutely as tight as it can be, having the backstop of the MSA with the governing terms in there with your warranties and your limitations of liabilities, and 3, making sure that your agreements with your providers provide you the appropriate coverage in the event of an incident. And then the backstop for all of that is insurance, right? And it's making sure that you're having the conversations with your insurance brokers, both on the professional liability side and on the cyber liability side, making sure that your broker knows exactly what you're doing for your customers and making sure that they're nodding their head up and down when you ask them if you're covered. Because if something happens and you end up not being covered, then you as the MSP have another pocket to go into, and that's your insurance broker. If they told you you'd be covered for a particular kind of incident and it turns out you're not, then you've got your broker's professional liability policy to go after.
So I do want to make sure that we cover another section that we said that we would touch on here, and that's all about levers, not just to reduce risk, but levers in your MSA and your SOWs that can help you with your profitability, to help with your cash flow. And I know Tom has got lots of good advice of how he structured agreements. I want to touch on that. Before we do, we have a couple more questions that are still in the security realm. This is from Dan. Dan, thanks for asking this. And man, Eric, this tees you up. We're in the process of designing all of our agreements now. Our general counsel does not specialize in MSSP style services. Does it make sense to have someone with focus help to get these foundations in place?
Yeah, no, thank you for the softball question. The answer is absolutely yes. But it also begs the question, and not to knock anyone's business practices, but a general counsel should understand your business. And if your general counsel doesn't understand your business, then it might be time to think about a new general counsel. But yes, if whoever the lawyer is, and I used the example earlier of your brother-in-law who's a divorce attorney writing your MSA, it's not going to do you any good. It just isn't. Talk to an expert. Talk to someone who does this for a living, not someone who can do it because they saw it once in a book 20 years ago.
And then Ross brings up another point too, another factor, not just knowing your business, your type of clients, your types of services, also knowing your state, right? I mean, regulations, compliance, these things can be variables too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to see in every MSA that gets signed, there's a compliance with laws section. And it's going to require both you and your customer to comply with all applicable laws and regulations. And usually it goes a step further and it says that if one party doesn't comply with applicable laws and regulations, that they will indemnify the other party. And we don't have time to talk about what indemnification is and what it means, but it's really expensive. So you do want to make sure that you are complying with all applicable laws and regulations in your states. And as more states start to either regulate or try to regulate the services that we provide, it's going to get worse.
Okay, let's we're talking a lot about risk, security. Unfortunately, things that are not so fun to think about, but are very necessary to think about. And great questions from everybody here on the call. If you do have other questions, please feel free to ask them now. We got about a little over 10 minutes left. I do want to bring up another point, maybe a little bit more fun to talk about, or a little bit more positive is talking about the cash flow question. And I apologize if you guys can't really see this comment, but Dan Comas, who's on the line, Dan is an MSP owner based out of Long Island, and Dan is awesome. He is super active on LinkedIn as well and has a great marketing presence, so you should follow him and check that out. Get some pointers for doing cool marketing videos. But here he is in our Slack group, the MSP Live Chat Slack group, and he's giving Tom a big shout out. Listen to this. I know you love this, Tom. He says, is anyone else out there signing clients to 3-year renewals with built-in annual rate increases, as Tom is continually recommending? Because that's what Dan's doing. He's gotten zero pushback on it. I just wanted to bring that up because, Tom, this is like he's speaking the gospel of Tom Watson, and he's seen good results.
We were talking about this before we got. And my big thing is going back to whether or not I'm going to sell my MSP someday. I want to be making every decision based around the idea that I could. And the things that make MSPs, I sold mine, I can tell you this, they didn't care about my a la carte work. They didn't care about my hardware sales. They didn't care about hourly billings. They only cared about the agreements, and they cared that those agreements were renewing and that they could look at those agreements and tell what they were going to make in the future. And so you want to structure your agreements in that way. And I know that Eric has some particular views on this as well.
Yeah, definitely. And there's two things to structure, right? One is the term and termination, auto renewals, and all that good stuff. But the other is how do your customers pay you? And when do they pay you? And what happens if they don't pay you? And all of that stuff. And number one, I highly recommend getting paid in advance for your services, right? You should never be performing services that you haven't been paid for yet. Because if you do, it just becomes a huge collection issue. So, and again, we kind of truncate this between the MSA and the SOW. In the MSA, we talk about how the customer pays, and when the customer pays, and all of that. And in the SOW, we talk about how much the customer pays and the term under which the contract runs. And don't be afraid. I know it's sometimes uncomfortable to ask your clients for money in advance. I was actually telling Tom and Jonathan earlier today that I have a client and he had what I thought were absolutely ridiculous payment terms where he'd bill his clients every week and his clients would pay him on a weekly basis, and he had to have a credit card on file, otherwise into the services. And I said to him, how do you ever get your clients to agree to this? And he said, they just do. And not that I recommend that billing structure, because frankly, I think it causes an administrative burden. But don't be afraid to ask to get paid for what you do.
I mean, this is also in the Gospel of Tom too. I mean, this is something you preach all the time, Tom. I know you have specific things in terms of project work, how you would structure that. But yeah, you're a big proponent. This is something that you've credited with kind of really turning your business around and really kind of launching it was taking care of cash flow this way.
Yeah, my big thing is in my agreements, I'm gonna make sure I'm getting paid upfront before the month starts. And I'm going to have it very clear in there that if I'm not paid up front, you don't get service. That's it. I wanted to touch on it real quick, too. What Dan said, I liked it. That he had a full increase per year. I think that's very reasonable. And that's one where and he even said he got away with a 10% one. But I think under 10%, you can have a pretty good, easy conversation with clients. And that makes a lot of sense. You start adding that up with contract inflation, and it will cover you for a long ways to come, and also increase, as we all know, these tools often get more expensive, or you need more tools. If you're not doing auto escalation clauses, you need to go back and put that in.
And by the way, Tom, that's a great point. And I'd like to take it a step further in the SOWs that I draft and say, look, this is a 3-year agreement. Here is your year 1 price. Here is your year 2 price. Here is your year 3 price. So there's not just a clause that says I can do it. It says right there in black and white, I'm going to do it. And frankly, that makes it easier from a billing perspective.
I think that's great. You're right. Like right up front somewhere where you're talking about what they're paying per month, it has maybe a table.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It shows, the table shows year 1 price, year 2 price, year 3 price, and then have a discussion during that negotiation with them about it and the reason for that. Because I can tell you on every managed service I've ever had, by the 3rd year, I've had to insert some tools that I wasn't paying for before, or there's some level of effort, and this is going to help you deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually inviting Dan on the screen here to see if he wants to talk about his recent experience with talking with clients about this. But okay, so while we're waiting for Dan there, Tom, any other leverage that you're pulling with your agreements to help with cash flow or profitability that you want to talk about?
Well, that was the big one. My other thing too is I know a lot of MSPs do 1-year agreements, and I think that's okay. And I have had clients that have told me that they can't sign something that's longer than 1 year for some kind of reason and what they do. But I'm always going to shoot for these 3-year ones whenever possible. And I can tell you from a valuation perspective, I talked to a number of people before. They were looking for long-term agreements, and 3 years seems to be a really good number to go. So I want to lock that early. But going back to the payment terms thing, I want to make sure I define those payment terms very clearly. I want to give, ideally, I want to hit their card or ACH them every month. I want to make it simple. I want to make it so they don't have to cut a check or anything like that. But I want to make it so the money's coming to me and there's not a manual effort each month to get it.
Yeah, and Tom, that's a great point. I deal with a lot of clients who are preparing to sell, and they bring me in to kind of get their business in order to sell, and that's a huge point on the valuation, because what is the value in your company? It's the present value of all your contracts. That's it. Let's not flatter ourselves. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about your contracts. And if you don't have long-term contracts, there is no present value, and you're just not going to get top dollar when you want to sell.
Well,
that's the thing. Yeah, I think people sometimes confuse product companies with service companies. Service companies are all about contracts. That's it. Nothing else matters. Literally, in my negotiating to sell my MSP, they didn't even want to see my extra project work and those project
They don't
sales.
care.
They didn't care about it at all. So don't when you're trying to value your business, look at it from that perspective and look at what can I contract clients up for, And even in a lot of cases, that project work, if you can estimate what their project work is going to be on a yearly basis, roll all underneath your managed service agreement. Put it all into the agreement if you can. It's going to pay you more in the long run.
Yeah. And I saw Ross just asked about 5-year contracts. And, for that, I think you got to draw the line somewhere, right? Because what you're offering to your customers today is going to be very different than what you're offering 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Who the heck knows what you're going to be doing 5 years from now? And contracts, my clients hear me say this all the time. They're a shield and they're a sword, right? Depending on the situation, you want to be able to hide behind your contract and you want to be able to use your contracts if you have to. But if your customer is going to lock you into something 4.5 years from now that you might not want to offer to them 4.5 years from now, I'm not sure you want to go as far as a 5-year contract.
All right, Dan, we finally got Dan, the man, on. How you doing, sir? Thank you so much for joining. I know we've been chatting about it here. You're chatting about it in the chat. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of going back to your clients and presenting them with 3-year terms, auto renewal, price increases?
Just the fact that I literally brought it to everybody's attention proactively as part of the conversation. I didn't bury it in there. I didn't try and have it trigger as something that they might, even if I didn't mean it that way, they might find it a year down the road and be like, what the heck is this? Why'd the bill go up? What, you didn't tell me about this. No one likes to, if they trust you, and a lot of people are just signing that contract because they know you have the relationship and they're moving forward. But you might fracture that trust if you assume they read it and they didn't, and then the price goes up, a year later, even if it's only, a small increment, and then you could do damage to a valuable long-term relationship that you have, which would damage your business and your bottom line. So the first and foremost, people care about price, right? Or it's a topic of conversation. So just put it on the table, explain what it is. I explain why we are raising our prices. In some cases, it's just cost of living. In some cases, it's to keep up with the rising cost of security tools. It's to keep our staff, the people that you love to talk to help you through your issues and, work with our company. I would like them to remain here. And we have to increase our prices a little bit in order to give everybody a life, One client they were just underpaying, and I put it on the table. I was like, here's our current rate. Here's what you guys currently pay. Over the next 3 years, we're going to get you up to that. And, we have their rates going up 10, 12% a year, and they were perfectly fine with it because they're very happy with our company. They're very happy with our team. And, it was real great reinforcement, honestly, because it said, all right, we're doing a great job and our guys are doing a great job and everybody's happy. So, those were definitely a couple of good days.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciated you sharing that in the Slack group because it just these are all things that we talk about. It's great to see someone who's actually out there doing it and then sharing what's happening and confirming that, man, this really worked out. It's great to share wins. So I'm really glad you did it.
Sure, anytime.
All right, Dom, I want to give you a chance. So you I think we're going to be raising. It looks like you were going to be saying something. What's up, bud?
Yeah, this is more of like a look and feel question for Eric. When it comes to the look and feel of an MSA, we were talking about, on the prep call, I can't believe some MSPs are handing out some MSAs that look like this. So if you could maybe offer, a couple, you got to have this on your MSA when it just comes to look and feel, and then maybe some big no-nos of what you should not have.
Great question.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And in my experience, again, I've been doing this a really, really long time. If an MSA looks good and if it looks professional and if the margins are nice and the font is nice and it looks like a nice solid legal document, you will get a lot more respect from your customers and frankly a lot less pushback than if you've got a 2-page thing that's bullet pointed and Roman numeraled and it just doesn't look good. So a lot of what I do is make sure that the agreements that I put out, both MSAs and statements of work, look like they're professional documents. You will get a lot less pushback from your customers just by that simple fact alone, of it just being a nice looking, professional looking document. They aren't going to look beneath the covers as much as if you put together something in 15 minutes that looks like a 7th grader did it.
So it shouldn't be a napkin, cocktail napkin.
No, and if it's written in crayon, then definitely no.
All right. Good to note. Everybody, we are right on time, and I want to thank Eric so much for joining us. Thank everybody in the audience here. Eric, we had several questions where people were asking how to get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you. I'm going to direct people back to this document. We can also just drop your email right here in the chat here too. But you've been kind enough to offer people should just reach out to you via email. Of course, they can connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Email, LinkedIn, whatever they like. And I just dropped my email address in the chat window.
Perfect. Easy to remember too, eric@tilds.com. Go ahead, Tom.
Force here with some clients, and so it's excellent. And if I were starting an MSP today, one of my favorite things to say, I would go to Eric and I would have him make me a custom managed service agreement that worked for me. And Eric, just to reinforce, you can work in wherever. You'll make an agreement. You'll look up whatever state laws you need to for that state, that jurisdiction. But it's not exclusive to any one area. You'll work with anyone. It's pretty much U.S. based, though, right?
So I got to be a little bit careful, right? So I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Michigan, right? That said, when I was general counsel for Logicalis, I worked in all 50 states. So an MSA is an MSA is an MSA, whether you're in Arizona or California or anywhere, right? It usually doesn't matter. There are no state-specific guidelines as it relates to the content of MSAs. I cannot give state-specific advice outside of the state of Michigan. But again, it just doesn't come up in what it is that we do. So contracts with customers, contracts with vendors, it just doesn't matter. I'm happy to help wherever they may be.
Excellent. Dan, I want to thank you, sir, for hopping on, sharing again that great real life story there. So thank you, sir. You
got it. Great job, everybody.
Thank you. We'll talk with you soon. And before everybody jumps off, just one last thing. I want to talk about what's next, right? And so Dom and Tom, feel free to take this one away. We've got something that you guys, we've been working on for a while. We do want to give a date. Usually we're every other Thursday. Because of the July 4th holiday, we're going to give a little bit of buffer there. So the next time we're meeting is going to be Thursday, July 15th, 1 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, Tom, you want to talk about what we're going to be covering?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. We have our MSP cost calculator we put out last year. I've gone back to it, and I've made a lot of changes and upgrades to it. And along with that, we're going to have Ross come on. And Ross has a telecom/MSP company, and he's in the chat here. And he's going to come on and tell us and talk to us about pricing in real time and how we worked on the calculator together and all the things it can do. We're going to put that out prior to that date as well. Is that right, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's available now. Thanks to your work and Dom too. You guys have got that available. So if everyone goes in that document, you can actually go in, click on that picture or the link that's there. It is right up there, and you can download a copy of the calculator. When you do so, you'll get an Excel spreadsheet. I'm also going to add a link to this after this chat here. That's a video that Tom put together, kind of walks through how you use it. So that way people can check it out and come with questions for whenever we regroup on July 15th.
And there's going to be a blog post that's coming out in the next few days that's going to go into details on where the enhancements to the calculator so you can understand why they're in there, how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. So all about profitability. We're going to see the calculator, walk through that. Here, we'd love to hear from you guys, how you're handling your pricing, what you're looking at in terms of your numbers, what matters to you, any kind of questions you have. And then we're going to get into Ross being kind enough to join to talk about his use case too. So more good stuff to come. And in the meantime, guys, thank you so much for joining again. The recording is going to be available in just a few minutes. And for everyone in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoy some summertime. And Eric, thank you once again for coming on. You were fantastic, sir.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, Jonathan and Tom, for having me, and thanks, Dom, as well.
All right. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye now.